Hi, my name is Virginia DiGaetano, and I'm the managing editor of Italics Magazine. Italics is an independent English language publication based in Rome with contributors all over Italy. And we cover current affairs, politics, culture, and society. Our mission is always to look at deeper issues going on inside of the country. And now, with the current crisis unfolding so rapidly, our country and everything around it is set to change rapidly. We want to be able to give you insights from people around the country who are specialists in different areas to talk about how things might change and what we can expect the future to look like. For the first of these interviews, we want to focus on immediate security concerns and the continuing and potentially altering energy crisis. I spoke with Gabriele Marchionna and Simone Rinaldi, who both work for Analytica for Intelligence and Security Studies, an Italian think tank that looks at intelligence, information, and energy. What will follow is some excerpts from our conversation that will hopefully help us all to understand a little bit better what we're looking at, why we're looking at it now, and what we can expect. So I want to start by doing a bit of general context. I think everyone, for the most part, understands the context of the conflict. Well, insofar as any of us are able to understand the context of the conflict, as long as we're willing to go back 30, 40 years, 120 years, 1917. But understanding at least sort of how we've arrived at the point in which we presently find ourselves internationally. But I think what's important to understand is where Italy exists in all of this. So Simone, what historically has the relationship been between Italy and Vladimir Putin? I think we know a couple of the more well-known examples. Some of our prime ministers have had great friendships. They've had blankets, quilts, they've had vacations together. But generally, what has that relationship been like, and how has that influenced Italy's position within larger blocs, within the European Union, the G7, and with NATO? Can you talk about that?
Well, it's a very complicated relations, as all the relations between states that are not aligned together. So, well, let's say that the relationship between Italy and Russia were mostly commercial after the end of the Cold War. And as you mentioned it before, it depends on the kind of government we had in Italy. The approach to the Russian issues could be a little bit different from one another. And at the same time, Italy has always been aligned with Europe. And even if we have a particular position in trading with Russia, we are one of the biggest. Italy is one of the biggest partners in the European Union for Russia under a commercial point of view. Italy did not separate from the European Union and also from other international organizations or international groups. The first example that comes up in my mind is the G8 that became G7 basically after the military intervention of Russia in Crimea. So I would say that the relationship before, because do not forget that this is probably we are living the days that will probably change the shape of Europe and the shape of international relationship in general for the next decades, I think. So it's always been a complicated relationship, especially if we consider that Russia started to put its interest in the Mediterranean Sea with the intervention in Syria as well. And with some kind of political and paramilitary intervention in Libya as well. So the relationship has not been as dramatic as it is today, but it's always been quite complicated for a contrast of interest between Italy, the international organization which Italy is a fundamental part, and Russia.
And then, Gabriele, as you know much better than I will, the other aspect of the relationship that's so important is energy, and how Italy is one of the most dependent countries in the European Union on Russia for energy purposes. So how did we get, or how did Italy get to be so dependent on Russian energy?
Yeah, okay. As Simone already said, like, the relationship is so long so far. Russia has historically been the European Union's main supplier of natural gas, beginning with the gas disputes between Europe, Russia, and Ukraine in 2006 and 2009, and following tensions that came to head with the Ukraine crisis in 2013 and 14, the EU has repeatedly sought to reduce its dependence on Russian imported natural gas, which now account for about 40% of European gas consumption. Given the intensified threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine had already alarmed the European Commission in considering various contingency plans in the event of further reduction or a complete blockage of gas supplies to the EU. Vladimir Putin's speech has triggered a race for alternative supply of European energy security. And the same reason are for Italy, are in line for Italy because of that relation. Italy, together with Germany, is among the European countries most tied to Moscow for gas. 46% of Italy's gas imports came from Russia. The latest data published by the Ministry of Ecological Transition revealed that in 2020, Italy imported almost 66.4 billion cubic meters of natural gas, of which 43% from Russia, followed by Algeria in 22%, Norway 11%, and Qatar 10%. That's the relation, like, in a basic way.
And so one of the things that I think has been very important, that's been more prominent in the media or different media, has been the integration and the way in which the Putin regime and his closest allies have been able to integrate or even infiltrate other economies and been able to essentially, through informal means or through different shell companies, through different, I mean, we can say that through laundering it very well, they've managed to move a lot of money out of Russia and out into Europe. This is especially the case in the UK, and this is something that's been quite difficult. This is a debate that's been going on now, is that the United Kingdom, in applying sanctions, is applying sanctions on money that's coming in, but there's already so much money in the country that it's very difficult to actually find it and trace it because it's been so well washed. Is that something that's problematic? Is that something that's present in Italy as well? Is there a presence of those kinds of relationship and that kind of economic infiltration? Have we seen that same kind of buying up of properties, anything like that? And Gabriele, do you feel like, do you have the scoop?
Yeah, Italy, as I said before, Italy, together with Germany, is among the European countries most tied to Moscow for gas. If Russia was to decide to interrupt gas supplies altogether, therefore Italy would lose almost half of its imports, and given that domestic production corresponds to less than 10% of the total, this would be a giant problem. One of the most logical and immediate solution for Rome could be to increase the share of non-Russian gas supplies looking especially at Algeria and Qatar, as I said before. This connection represents the biggest relation and integration between Russian and Italian economy, also in a diplomatic way, and maybe later we'll see how to explain this kind of relation in a particular and complex way.
Simone?
Yeah, well, I think Gabriele is completely right, but I would like just to add that both economies, the Italian one and Russian, are integrated. I don't think that Italian economy needs Italy and vice versa. I think that right now we are witnessing a change even in the economical world. That's because most of the companies that are tied to Russia are starting cutting their ties. And this will be a shock for sure. But I don't think it will be a complete disaster if this was part of the question.
Right.
I mean, the economies are tied, definitely. At least they were until yesterday. I'm not sure they're going to be so tied in the future, but I don't think it's going to be something that will create massive disruption in Italy. The key point, in my opinion, is the energy part. And right now, it seems that the government has some kind of backup plan to cover that field. So I wouldn't say that if this was an implicit part of your question, I wouldn't say that there's going to be a massive disruption in the Italian economic system because of this. Of course, a lot of cooperation that agencies and companies from both countries were doing is going to stop for a little bit until the situation will get calmer, generally speaking. But and there will be, of course, bad moments for the economy, bad moments for the single company. I don't think that these bad moments will create definitive disruption.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it does bring up a point, though, that in terms of that economic integration, on something that I think we'll probably get to later on, is also the whether or not, which is still to be understood and to be determined, whether or not China becomes at all involved in a substantial way, because then there's a difference. That's a different question. Because as we know, that the Chinese and the Italian economies are profoundly linked, and so then that becomes a different matter, and it remains it is the bigger question. Unless I'm
yeah, and I also think that these days that we are living, the end of February, beginning of March, is going to be a massive mixing of the deck in the world stage. As you mentioned, China, we don't know if China is going to back up and try to save Russia from the sanction the Western are providing. We don't know if China will basically abandon Russia. The situation is very difficult to read at the moment. So if we focus on only the Italian side and the Russian, it's going to be a little bit easier. If we put in the middle China and other actors, do not forget the entire Middle East, which is playing a key role as well, or the US. So, I mean, this is probably the analyst nightmare.
Right. So what you're saying is this is the first of a series. We'll be doing an entire season. We'll be seeing each other for 12 episodes.
We might do this.
We'll start having musical guests. It'll be great. It'll be wonderful. Gabriele, your hand.
Yeah, just to add some points, like for the relation also with China and the Asian countries. As I said before, like the conflict is occurring just as oil and GNL supplies have already been scarce for months. For that, solution, for the second solution, I explained before, diversify our suppliers, this option seems to be the favorite one in the short term, although with some limitation of various nature. The first one, with regard like limited liquefaction capacity, mainly related with the GNL imported from the US. But on the other side, we have like Italy and like Europe, economic competition for temporary benefits due to the competition with the Asian buyers, and particularly China, and their import capacity, because due to the block with Russia, we had to face a competition with the Asian price of gas, and so the economic competition for energy supply. Also high prices, like the additional demand in a already tight energy market would put strong upward pressure on prices, and causing a major blow of the European economy in front of the Chinese one. And European infrastructure is designed to supply all Europe only from the east and partially from the south, including Italy, of course. And even if possible to supply the entire region from the west, it's almost impossible to link this kind of competition, I said before, with a right solution and possible solution, without facing really China and its market. That's why the point about that relation that I missed before.
And that actually brings up the other point that we had talked about, the timing of it. Why now? And you, Gabriele, have written about this exact thing, about the energy markets. And I'll just quote you saying that, the weakness of the global energy market in the late 2010s and its new rigidity in the 2020s. So I think this speaks to that point again of why now?
Yeah.
And that does seem to be the question that people are asking. If you want to hear even more from Gabriele and Simone, then join our Patreon community, where you'll get exclusive access to an extended, deep dive version of this interview. Patreon is our way of maintaining independent, community-supported journalism that's always about giving you the best, most balanced view of what's happening in Italy and abroad. Becoming part of the community helps us continue making the stories that we think are important and the ones that will influence our future altogether. If you're part of the Patreon community, no matter how much you can contribute, you'll always have access to everything on the platform. We do believe that patronage is not about privilege, and that in order to give everyone access, we all need to be able to do as much as we can. And we appreciate everyone and any bit of support. So until the next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.